launch of Smart Landlord Guide 2019, something I've really been looking forward to. Now, throughout 2019, Property Tribes has been championing the concept of the smart landlord. And it's all part of our 10th anniversary celebrations and festivities, because we believe that the smart landlord is the profile of landlord who's going to survive and thrive in the challenging market conditions that we're all facing. For the Smart Landlord Guide 2019, we have curated all the golden nuggets and top tips that have been added to Property Tribes over the past decade. And we've also added the tips from the gentleman who has very kindly offered to power the guide, and that is property investor and developer of over 40 years experience, John Howard. John, I'm so delighted that you wanted to get on board with the Smart Landlord Guide. What do you think of the concept of the smart landlord? Is that going to be the profile of the landlord that survives and thrives in these challenging conditions?
I think absolutely. It's so important that all that advice you've given over the last 10 years and the future advice that's going to be given is to smart landlords. It's all about being smart as we go forward. Life is changing, new laws are coming in, and we've got to be ahead of the game. What I would say is this government, which is normally supporting landlords on the whole in the past, is actually doing the opposite and making life very, very hard. And I can't quite understand why they should do so when there's a housing shortage and we need people to rent their homes out and to buy other homes because the local authorities can't cope, the housing associations can't cope. So it needs the private landlords to be more supported, certainly, than they're going to be going forward by the sound of things.
No, I totally agree. I think there's been a huge kind of impetus by the government to professionalise the sector, which of course is a positive thing, but in a way I think they've gone around it in a very heavy-handed manner. They haven't really understood the complexities of the sector, how fragmented it is, and how each tweak that you made, it has a knock-on effect somewhere else. So do you think they've just maybe tweaked too many levers?
I think the problem is, in principle, the idea is right. They're trying to become more professional, which is good. And of course, people like myself, professional landlords, have had limited companies for the last 40 odd years and been paying tax all the way through. There are some landlords, believe it or not, that haven't paid any tax. Now that isn't right for the rest of us. So in principle, I'm with them, but they're just using a sledgehammer, I think, to crack a nut. And I think that at the end of the day, as usual, the government needs to take more advice. They need to talk to more landlords before they come out with these laws.
No, well, I totally agree with that, and I'm hoping that with the merger of the Residential Landlords Association and the National Landlords Association into the National Residential Landlords Association, that landlords have a much bigger voice. But let's go back to the guide. Now, you have very kindly contributed some of your tips as well, haven't you?
I have, and I think one of the biggest tips there is when you have a tenant, check every 3 months, not 6 months. Check that they're looking after the property as well as you would look after your own property every 3 months. So many people say to me, "Oh yeah, they check every 6." It's not enough. Check every 3. Things can happen. Their personal situation can change, which might deteriorate your property.
Well, that's very interesting you say that, John, because we've always been a massive fan of inventories and also mid-term property inspections, because if you do check on a regular basis, you can nip problems in the bud if you see, for instance, a tenant starting to hoard, or they've got an unreported pet in the property.
Not just that, they might have problems, might have mental problems, social problems as well, in which case you can try and help them. It's not just about the property, it's also about, if you go there, and I've had some over the years, they've got into difficulty, it might be financial, it might be, mental issues, and try and help them.
I'm so glad you said that, John, because I think, that is at the core of the smart landlords method of operating, is that they genuinely care about the tenant. They want to supply a safe and compliant home.
It's really important. You want your tenant to be there as long as possible normally. And so if you try and charge too much rent, they won't stay. So you've got to balance it. You want them there. You know, if you lose 1 month's rent, any increase you've got and been telling all your friends you've got another £100 a month off them, that's gone. So you're far better off just to have a good relationship with them. If you've got a good tenant, look after them. Look after them.
Well, totally second that. John, in your 40 years or so of being in property, of course you've made mistakes,
Yes.
but there's absolutely nothing wrong with making a mistake if you learn from it.
Absolutely.
And one of my favourite sayings is actually by the singer Cheryl Cole. She said, I've learned so much from making my mistakes that I'm thinking of making some more. Now, obviously in property, making mistakes, it can be costly.
Can be costly.
So we always kind of say that, prevention is better than cure. And the smart landlord should be looking to prevent problems developing, mitigating risk at every turn.
Absolutely. Anticipate any problems that are likely to happen. And of course, the more experience you have, the more you can anticipate the problems, anticipate them and deal with them before it becomes an issue. Before it becomes an issue. If the rent's 2 weeks late, go and see them straight away. See what the problem is. See if you can help them with their problem. Because once it gets to 2 months late or 3 months late and you can't get them out and you're arguing with them, you go to court, it takes time. So anticipate any problems early and do not bury your head in the sand and think, oh, it'll get better. Because you know what? It doesn't normally.
No, I totally agree. In property, if you've got a problem, if you don't actually deal with it in the early stages, it can really escalate and it can end up costing an awful lot more than if you had kind of got in early. Over your time in property, John, do you think that as the years have gone on, you yourself have worked smarter and smarter?
Yes, I think so. I mean, years and years ago, what people would accept in terms of condition of their flat or their home that you're renting to them is changed completely. The standards are much, much higher. The local authorities are making sure that you've got central heating, insulation, and rightly so. You know, things move on. And for the landlords that haven't moved on, there's a big problem because they suddenly wonder why I'm getting a lot of voids, I can't rent the properties, they're in poor condition, I can't afford to do the work. It really becomes a problem that snowballs. So you do need to upgrade. And over the years, we've continued to upgrade our stock, which is expensive. And you could argue, if there isn't any property inflation, then owning these properties and paying a mortgage and paying commission and repairing them, there's not much left for you. So you really are looking for those few years every 10 where you get inflation.
No, I totally agree. And of course, if you don't upgrade your properties, then the interior condition's going to deteriorate. You're going to achieve less rent. The value of the asset's going to drop. So actually, it's going to be kind of a downward spiral.
You've just got to keep going. It's a bit like having an old house. You just need to keep spending so much a year on it rather than spending a whole load in one go, probably. But you do need to keep up to date. If the tenant complains about any repairs that need to, get them done straight away. Don't wait until they've moaned for 3 months and then moved out. Get them done straight away.
Well, very, very good advice there from John, as we would expect.
Thank you.
So we're so delighted, John, that you've agreed to power this guide for us and it obviously contribute your tips. I know actually that the whole concept of the Smart Landlord is very close to your heart. It's why you've started your seminars, your YouTube channel. This is something that you really want to make a contribution to the wider community, isn't it?
I just think it's so important that landlords understand, one, what they're getting into before they get into it. That's the first thing, because it's not all glamour and, you know, okay, here we're in Southampton, it's beautiful, but I mean, not every day is like that for me, and not every day is going to be like that for the landlord either. You know, you can have days where things don't go well, you know, tenants don't pay rent for some reason, and so on, and you just have to be realistic of what you're getting yourself into.
Fantastic stuff. Well, that is it. It is the launch of our Smart Landlord Guide 2019. All the tips from 10 years of Property Tribes and, sorry to keep saying it, but the 40 years odd that John has been involved in property as both an investor, developer and landlord. So it's a really, really fantastic resource full of golden nuggets from all around the property community on Property Tribes. And we do hope that you enjoy reading the guide and also taking away those tips, because ultimately somebody else's hindsight can be your foresight and can help you mitigate risk in your property business. So enjoy the guide, and thank you again to John for joining me here in Southampton and also actually powering the guide on behalf of Property Tribes. And we look forward to hearing your comments, and actually also do add your own tips to it at the bottom of the thread, because we want to really build up this resource to benefit the Property Tribes community.